How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Robert Arms. My name is Rob. I'm the host of this channel, and I hope you're having a wonderful Friday like I am. So, I'm partly inspired to make this video because of a funny conversation I had with a few friends of mine. So, these two friends of mine aren't really into firearms or have an extensive knowledge of it like I do. And for some reason, I casually brought up gun design. And I asked one of the friends, "Are you aware of what a short stroke gas piston is?" And he just casually looks over and just straight up says, "You just made that up, bro. That's not real."
You made those words up.
No, those are real words.
We had a good laugh about it, but the reality was, obviously, these two didn't really know what a short stroke gas piston was. But one would be shocked by how many famous firearms out there operate off of a short stroke gas piston. Just like on the opposite end of that, long stroke gas pistons, there are quite a lot of firearms that operate in that same way. They are both piston driven firearms. There's a lot of piston driven firearms. So I figure I might as well talk about piston guns today. So what exactly is a piston gun? Well, obviously it's a gun that operates with a piston. Yeah, no shit. But how and in what way? So the general principle behind having to use a piston is to utilize gas pressure to operate the mechanism using a piston. So there are two very distinct kinds of pistons, right? In a lot of modern firearms and other famous firearms from the past. So there are long stroke gas piston guns and short stroke gas piston guns. So some good examples of long stroke gas piston guns are the AK-47, the M1 Garand, the FNC, the Galil, or in machine guns like the M249, the M240, or in a Russian light machine gun like the PKM. Some examples of short stroke gas piston guns are used in weapons like the FAL, the SCAR, the G36, the M1 carbine, and in new firearms like the MCX Spear. So what are the distinct differences between the long stroke gas piston and the short stroke gas piston? So luckily I have a very nice prime example of a long stroke gas piston inside of this Russian AK-47. If I disassemble this, I take off the dust cover and remove this recoil guide rod, you will see that it looks like the entire mechanism is built out of one piece. So in a long stroke gas piston, typically the piston rod itself, or the op rod, is generally attached directly to the bolt carrier group itself. It's all moving in one piece. So in essence, the long stroke piston has to move in a long stroke in order to operate the bolt. So for a short stroke gas piston example, I have this FAL from Belgium. We break it open, I pull the dust cover off, and I remove this rat tail bolt. Now, I don't want to go all the way with disassembly here, but you can kind of get the gist of it. So, if you look right there, that little circle right there, there's a rod inside of there. So essentially what that rod is that is the short stroke piston. So the whole concept behind the short stroke piston is that when a round is fired in this chamber and a bullet flies through this whole barrel, once it gets to the gas port here, that gas is rerouted directly into this short stroke piston, and essentially it whacks the bolt open and moves it to the rear in order to cycle the bolt. So, in other words, the piston is not directly attached to the bolt carrier group itself, but in fact, it actually impacts it, moving in a short stroke. Now, the reasoning behind why so many firearms utilize pistons like this, long stroke or short stroke, is because they are known to be incredibly reliable forms of cycling the weapon. Obviously, there are different kinds of firearms out there like direct impingement and roller delayed, but that's for a different topic and a different subject. But regardless, this is one of the most common forms of firearms out there. So where exactly did they come from? Or who even came up with the idea or the concept of it? The majority of gas-operated firearms, including piston guns, traces its lineage to the great John Moses Browning. Now, during the 1880s, during the time of the lever gun, the revolver, and the breech loader, John Moses Browning attended a shooting competition where fatefully he would have a spark of genius. He had noticed that The rounds expelling out of the muzzles of the rifles that day were causing so much concussion that it would cause grass in front of the muzzles to expel at such a force that it inspired Browning to ask this question. Could he theoretically use that gas force to be able to cycle it through a mechanical system that could load the rounds into the chamber for the shooter instead of the shooter doing it themselves, like in a repeater? Now, though rapid fire weapons did exist back then, like the Gatling gun, but its mechanism was in stark contrast compared to the gas operated system. It required the shooter to have to manually crank the system, loading the rounds, feeding the rounds, firing the rounds, and expelling the casings, all while the shooter has to constantly move this hand crank. It was not like a gas operated system where all the shooter would have to do is simply load a magazine and pull the trigger and let the weapon do the cycling, the loading, the firing, the extracting, etc. After a few years of development and patents filed, eventually this would lead to John Browning's first ever belt-fed machine gun, the Browning M1895 Potato Digger. It was called this because of its weird mechanism where it would blast gas into a lever that would flip downwards as if it was digging into the ground. And this lever would operate the rear of the mechanism to be able to cycle the rounds. But it was all gas operated. After the development of this machine gun, John Browning would end up working on other weapons like the Browning automatic rifle and the M2 Browning as a way of coming up with more innovative gas-operated firearms. Many other inventors would end up following in his footsteps, trying to develop their own kind of gas-operated firearm using things like long-stroke pistons and short-stroke pistons, many of them originating this way. But anyway, there you have it. So that's how gas-operated piston guns pretty much kind of originated. There's plenty of history that I probably skimmed over, but I'm sure the comment section will end up correcting me on that anyway. So I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you guys had a great rest of your day, and stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next video.